This group of scientists has arrived on an island where evolution stopped millions of years ago. But they are about to discover that dinosaurs aren't the only ancient beings living here. A man named Professor George is returning from an expedition in the Amazon. While traveling down the Amazon River, he and the locals helping him encounter some turbulent waters. While the dangerous waters pose a threat to everyone's lives, George is far more concerned with the packages they are carrying with them. All the boats get capsized and the passengers fall into the river, but George is still yelling to make sure they grab his belongings. As George and the locals manage to climb up the side of the river, George notices that most of his belongings have been claimed by the river, with the exception of one package. In England, a young columnist named Edward Malone, who works for the Daily Gazette, is given an assignment by his boss to attend a lecture on dinosaurs and write a report about it. George is an ambitious young man who implores his boss to let him take on more serious stories, like murders and political affairs, and his boss says that if he covers this story well, he'll get his chance. Next, Edward discovers that the lecture has been organized by a rich and influential man named Lingworth, whose daughter Gladys Edward is dating, with the hopes of getting married soon. However, at the event, Edward is uncomfortable when Gladys' attention is diverted away from him by the arrival of Lord Roxton, a renowned hunter who has just returned from Africa. Gladys is smitten by his heroic and adventurous lifestyle and personality, much to the jealousy of Edward. The lecture is conducted by a respected professor named Summerlee, but he is loudly interrupted by the arrival of George. It is revealed that George does not command much respect among the scientific community due to his wild and far-fetched ideas. George presents a bone to Summerlee and asks him what he thinks it is. Summerlee replies that it is an unusually well-preserved fossil of a pterosaur. George confirms that it does belong to a pterosaur, but it is not well-preserved. It looks fresh because it's from a pterosaur that George killed only 2 months ago. Summerlee, along with the rest of the room, laughs at George and ridicules him, but George insists that he is not lying. He claims that he has found an isolated place in the Amazon where pterosaurs are still alive. He proposes an expedition to find and explore the lair of the pterosaurs and receives even more ridicule. However, Roxton, sensing an adventure, agrees to go with George and provide half the funding. Edward, who is obviously jealous of Roxton and looking to prove that he is an adventurer too, says that he will join the trip and provide the remaining funding through the Gazette. His boss is not happy about this, but Edward convinces him by saying that if George is telling the truth, this could be the biggest story they will ever publish. Summerlee says that he will never join such a non-scientific expedition, but at the last minute changes his mind and boards the ship. He says that this expedition should have at least one proper scientist, since George isn't one in his opinion. Edward meets Gladys before leaving and asks her about his proposal for marriage that he made earlier. Gladys tells him that she's always wanted to marry a heroic adventurer, and Edward just isn't it. Edward is disappointed, but he doesn't give up. He kisses Gladys right in front of her father to prove that he is a risk-taker as well. As the journey begins, George shows the group their destination, on a map created by a Portuguese explorer, who supposedly saw the lair of the pterosaurs in the 1600s and went mad on his return. This doesn't exactly inspire confidence in the rest of the group. After a 7-week journey, they arrive at a mission station in the Amazon, run by Reverend Theo. They are greeted by a young woman named Agnes, Theo's adoptive daughter, whose parents died when she was very young. Roxton immediately starts flirting with her. He a dog. The group sits down for dinner, and Theo and Summerlee get into a heated argument over science and religion. Theo claims that the Bible tells them the correct history of the world, while Summerlee argues that now that they know about evolution, they can confidently claim that the Bible is wrong. Meanwhile, Edward tells Roxton to not make moves on Agnes, because she is a naive, socially backward girl who has grown up in the jungle and doesn't understand his big city ways. Roxton tells Edward to mind his own business. Agnes overhears all this. The next morning, as they prepare to depart for the Amazon jungle, Agnes demands to go with them. Roxton is hesitant, because she is a girl, and he says that she will be a liability, but George makes the argument that she knows this region and the language of the natives who will be helping them, She is an asset. Roxton only hears the first half of that word and agrees. They begin their journey, traveling in small boats along the river. Edward diligently writes down every detail of their experience for his story. George takes them through a secret tributary that he discovered on his last trip here, but the superstitious locals accompanying them aren't happy about this because they believe this region contains evil spirits. Edward asks Agnes if she knows a cure for the insect bites he's been picking up along the journey, and Agnes, who is still angry at his socially backward comment, lies to him that if he covers the bites in his own urine, they will heal. Edward does so, but then he stinks, and no one wants to sit with him. One night, Edward sees some bones hanging in the distance, and when he pulls on them, a frightening figure pops out and scares him. The superstitious locals take this as a bad omen and decide to abandon the expedition, leaving the group to look after themselves and carry their own heavy belongings. The next morning, Reverend Theo arrives and reveals that he has been following them for days. He suggests that they continue the expedition northeast instead of north because that is a much easier path. The group travels northeast, but the path they find is hardly easy. Edward simply assumes that maybe the other path was even harder. They arrive at the plateau that is indicated on the map and find a cave system, which they believe will take them to the top. Inside the cave, they find ancient drawings of dinosaurs. A little way inside the cave, they reach a dead end, and Roxton detects hints of gunpowder on the wall, suggesting that someone used explosives to seal the cave. Next, Summerlee spots a unique butterfly, and while he, Roxton, Edward, and Agnes observe it, a pterosaur flies in and steals their food in front of George and Theo. George tells Summerlee what happened, but he doesn't trust George. He looks toward Theo, and Theo refuses to verify the story. Despite seeing the pterosaur, he claims that it was probably a big vulture. The group finally finds a way to the top of the plateau, but a formidable gap separates them from their destination. Roxton and Edward chop down a long tree, and it proves to be long enough to create a bridge between the two surfaces. Roxton crosses the bridge first and ties a rope between the two sides for safer crossing. The crossing is a nerve-wracking process, but all of them manage to get to the other side. In the end, it's Theo's turn, but instead of crossing, he starts sabotaging the bridge because he claims what they are doing here is the devil's work. Roxton tries to stop him, but Theo takes the bridge apart and cuts the rope before Roxton can cross. Fortunately, the rope is still tied on the other side, and Roxton manages to climb back up. Theo leaves the group stranded with no way to get back home. The group, still shocked by Theo's actions, continues its journey and decides to camp in the forest for the night. Edward goes out to look for a water source and encounters a baby dinosaur. He is cautious, but then notices that the creature is only eating grass. The mother of the baby arrives, and at the same time, so does the rest of the group. They all finally see the truth with their own eyes. Summerlee, who has been skeptical of George claims the entire journey, finally concedes defeat. The next morning, the group continues its journey, and finally comes across the lair of the pterosaurs. Overcome with curiosity, Summerlee decides to observe the creatures more closely, exposing himself to them. This proves to be a bad idea as the pterosaurs start attacking them, resulting in Summerlee sustaining a shoulder injury. Roxton manages to scare the creatures away by repeatedly shooting at them. The group's troubles only get worse at night, as they have to chase away another not-so-friendly dinosaur using fire. The next morning, Edward climbs a tree and spots a lake in the distance. They decide to head toward it. While in the tree, Edward encounters an ape-like creature and falls down. He describes the creature as closer to men than most monkeys, and this puzzles Summerlee and George. As they arrive at the lake, George tells Edward that since he discovered it, he gets to name it. Still very much a lover boy, Edward names it Lake Gladys. Next, Edward warns Agnes to not take Roxton's flirting seriously, but Agnes gets angry that Edward keeps assuming she's naive. Their conversation is interrupted by a dinosaur that chases them through the woods. The two fall into a massive trap that appears out of nowhere. The dinosaur falls into the trap as well and dies, and Edward wonders who placed the trap there. Nearly escaping death together lowers the tension between the two and brings them closer. The two hear gunshots and arrive on the scene to find a startled Roxton, who reveals that he's just killed one of the apemen, but many others kidnap the professors. Next, they notice some natives arriving on the shore, and Agnes suggests that the natives might be able to help them. Roxton is skeptical of this idea. Meanwhile, the professors arrive at the apemen community. Agnes, who knows the language, speaks to the natives, and the natives tell her that whoever killed the ape man is their friend. Roxton claims the kill, and an alliance is formed. The professors observe the behaviors of the ape men. They are shocked when some of them bring in two native humans, kill one brutally with a heavy rock, and eat his flesh. Next, amidst the chaos, the ape men are about to perform the same procedure on Summerlee and another native, when Roxton, Edward, Agnes, and the natives arrive and overpower the ape men. The scene becomes a slaughter, but George tells them to stop, citing the importance of preserving this species. The natives kidnap some of the ape men and bring them along with the group to their village. At the village, the chief of the natives expresses his gratitude because one of the natives that they saved from the ape men was his son. The chief leads the group into a cave, where he tells them about how his ancestors met the Portuguese mapmaker Luís Jorge's resemblance to Luís' picture in an ancient book, convinces the natives that he is a god. The chief then tells the legend of a devil who blocked the exit to this cave. The group recognizes this blockage to be the same one that they encountered from the other side. They suspect the hand of Theo in all this. As they eat with the natives, Roxton learns from Marie, the chief's daughter, that she gets to hunt with the men of the tribe until she is married. This is their tradition. An ape man is brought for execution, but George interferes and says that this species is a link between man and animal and should be preserved. Roxton believes that they shouldn't interfere in the tribe's customs, but the execution is still temporarily halted. Over the next few weeks, they all adapt to life in the village. George enjoys his newfound god status, and Summerlee works on constructing devices that can help them get off this plateau and head home. Meanwhile, Roxton earns the status and respect of a warrior, teaching the natives how to hunt with guns. George also takes time out to feed the ape men. Edward continues to document their entire adventure for his column through writing and drawing. Next, Roxton forms a romantic relationship with Marie, and the two end up getting married. Meanwhile, George goes back to the lair of the pterosaurs and steals one of their eggs. Then, a powerful emotional moment occurs, as the group and the entire village witness the ape men in captivity perform a burial ritual for one of their babies who died. They place flowers on the grave and show signs of mourning, indicating a level of cultural and emotional advancement that was not expected of them. George becomes even more interested in this species. Edward tells Agnes all about his relationship with Gladys, and in a moment of levity, the two decide to go for a swim in the lake. Meanwhile, Summerlee tries making explosives to blow open the cave blockage, but it doesn't work. Amidst all this, the ape men start making loud noises, seemingly calling for help. The chief's son says that they should exterminate them, but the chief does not agree. Just then, dinosaurs arrive in the village, apparently responding to the noises. Seeing this, Edward and Agnes rush to warn the villagers. Meanwhile, the ape men start exhibiting a strange behavior. They start covering their faces with feces. It is revealed that this somehow keeps the dinosaur from attacking them. Roxton grabs a gun to try to bring the situation under control. He manages to kill one of the dinosaurs while another makes its way toward Marie. The chief tries to protect his daughter but gets severely injured in the process. Roxton also tries to intervene, but the dinosaur knocks him out with its tail. Finally, Edward grabs the gun and finds his moment of glory as he kills the second dinosaur. A loud explosion is heard in the cave, revealing that Summerlee's efforts have finally worked. However, Summerlee returns to find the village in chaos. The chief succumbs to his injuries, and now George is no longer viewed as a god. He is viewed as an evil figure who brought all this on the village because he stopped them from killing the ape men. George and the group make a run for it as the villagers chase them. Marie decides to join Roxton and the group in their escape plan, but amidst the chaos, an ape man stabs Roxton with a knife that it stole from Edward earlier. The natives kill the ape man and arrive to kill Roxton. but when they see his condition, they call off the attack. Meanwhile, the rest of the group goes through the cave and arrives back at the jungle, where they find a rather disturbed Theo. Theo admits that this place proves humanity was created through evolution and not by God, but he cannot let the world know this. He must seal the cave to keep this place a secret. The rest of the group cannot agree to this plan, but in his desperation, Theo pulls a gun at them. A chaotic struggle to disarm Theo ensues, and amidst it, Theo is shot. Next, the group waits for Roxton to arrive, but in vain. Eventually, they are rescued by natives from the mission station and brought back to England as heroes. Edward's boss is very happy with him because his story is going to rake in a lot of money for the paper. But Edward isn't happy because he discovers that Gladys is married to another man now. George and Summerlee hold a lecture to share the findings of their expedition, and at the lecture, George shows everyone a baby pterosaur, which hatched recently from the egg he stole. The pterosaur gets startled by the camera flashes and flies out of a window. With the only evidence now gone, Edward and Summerlee make a startling, selfless decision and convince George to announce that the entire expedition was faked. They do this to protect the tribes and the animals that live on the plateau from exploitation. George agrees to sacrifice his scientific reputation and makes the announcement. Afterward, Summerlee returns to his family life, while George decides to set off on his next adventure, looking to find Atlantis. Agnes and Edward acknowledge that they grew romantic feelings for each other during the expedition and decide to be a couple. Edward decides to pursue his dream of being a novelist, inspired by his adventure. Finally, it is revealed that Roxton survived the stab wound and decided to live his life peacefully with Marie in the village. The end. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.